Hi, my name is Ayana Murphy, and this is my project. It's on the robot monster trope, and it is titled War, Rebellion, and Industrialization, the Robot Monster Trope. So, I just want to preface this by saying the term robotics is used in the science fiction genre as an all encompassing term, but robots made in the robotics field are simply just programmable machines capable of automatically carrying out a complex series of movements. Um, Artificial intelligence, or AI, is the capacity of computers or other machines to exhibit or simulate intelligent behavior. And the robots in the science fiction genre, such as the examples I'm going to use, are they're technically referred to as androids, which are just automatons resembling human beings, or just the combination of robotics and AI to create anthropomorphic robots. So I just wanted to clear that up because it's a little complicated. But today I will be using the word robot because it's just easier. So yeah. So if you ever question that the presence of robots are a human fear, just look at something that we have to click at every day. This "I am not a robot" thing. Everyone's seen it. It's a problem. But I just wanted to start off by showing some examples of robots that we may or may not be familiar with, and some of them are part of robot media, and some are just real life examples. Um, and what I was talking about earlier with like robotics, the iRobot Roomba vacuum is exactly what I mean. So like this technically isn't like AI, but it is programmable and it does move. But this is technically what a robot would be, but we understand that like it changes. So yeah, we have the iRobot Roomba vacuum, we have the Amazon Echo Dot, we have R2D2 and the C3PO, which are from Star Wars. And then we have the robot in Black Mirror season 4 episode 5 Metalhead. This episode freaked me out. That little robot dog monster thing. We actually have an example of real life. The police, I think the NYPD, if I'm not mistaken, has a robot dog. Insane. And then, of course, Sophia the robot, which is really more of the robot monster that we're going to be talking about here, the android. She's anthropomorphic. She moves her face to like express human emotion. Whereas R2D2 and C3PO, they are robots. They do talk, at least C3PO does. But they're very obviously robots. They're very mechanical. Even their voices are mechanical. So, yes, the one at the bottom right is where humans start to be afraid. These are when they turn into monsters. So my thesis is robots aren't inherently monstrous and only become so in a system of exploitation by exhibiting repressed human behavior, and I'm going to tell you why. And to set the scene of the robot world, I'm just going to go through some robot chronology, highlighting important dates for robotic spikes. And through my research, I find that the start of robotics was really in like the 1820s, and this is a loose date because the Industrial Revolution in the United States, the dates are kind of varying, but it seems to start in the 1820s. And right at the tail end of it, which is like 1870, we get the first illusion of a robot-esque figure. And this robot-esque figure is actually a steam man. It's from the book called The Steam Man of the Prairies by Edward S. Ellis, which was written in 1868. Yeah, so that's the first start of a robot-esque figure. And then in the 1920s, we get the word robot, finally. It's coined by Karel Capek. The name actually derives from the Czech word robotnik, which means forced worker, and that has ties to what I will talk about later. In 1940 is the creation of the iRobot universe by Isaac Asimov. He's an American writer, and yes, that's where we get the start to this. And I'm going to be using an adaptation of this like novel series later. This was the foundation for most modern day dystopian monster robot tropes. And then in the 70s and 80s, this is where we get the very first computers and the conception of like the very first like a rough draft of the internet. And then at the turn of the century, this is when the internet really pops off. This is like where MySpace and social media, that's where that starts to come in. But what is missing? It is very, very, very important to understand what's happening historically and socially, as we know that is vital to what the monster entails. So first, 1868 is actually a couple years after the end of the Civil War. And then we get the Prohibition in the 1920s. In the 1940s, we get World War II and the Industrial Boom. And then in the 70s and 80s, we have groups like the Black Panther Party. We also have the Vietnam War, which led to anti-war protests, naturally. Also, like the hippie movement as well, which kind of fueled this anti-war protest situation. And then we also have another industrial boom at this time. And then at the turn of the century, we have 9/11, which led to the war in Afghanistan. So these all seem very random, but they all have to do with the underlying issues that I've mentioned in my title, actually. Rebellion, war, and industrialization of American cities. So this all seems to, tie in. Where there's war, there's going to be, rebellion against the war sentiment, or just, just kind of sticking it to the man. And then with war, usually what comes after war is the industrialization of cities. So that's what we're seeing here. So just to really just lay down some ground rules for the robot universe, because as we know, every good monster trope has its own rules. These laws are from Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, which I talked about earlier. And law number 1 is a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. Law number 2 is a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And the last law is a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. With these laws, they exist within the world, but also a very important fact is that they are encrypted into the code of the robot. So it would seem as if these laws are just impossible to break because they are in the code, or so we thought. So we're finally getting into it. How is the robot the monster, right? I've chosen 3 of Cohen's theses that fit the best. The first one, I think, is pretty obvious. Thesis number 1, the monster's body is a cultural body. As discussed before in the robot chronology, the robot trope is heavily influenced by historical and social changes going on at that time, and that's like the destruction that human war calls for revolution and rebellion against the state, and the industrialization after war. The next one is the third thesis, which is the monster is a harbinger of category crisis, which this one is a little less, I admit, but still, robots and monster tropes are machines, but they deviate to express human emotion, causing them to be on the border of human and machine. The lines are very blurry, and like morality gets called into question, and ethics as well. I personally think that the last thesis is the most important, the most specific to this, is thesis 4, the monster dwells at the gates of difference. This thesis essentially talks about how there is a history that humans have of othering people in order to justify carrying out violence and exploitation. Cohen gives like the example of Native Americans and Jewish people. But yeah, so not only are they othered, but they're considered subhuman, and that's why there's exploitation is allowed. This is the same with monsters, and in this case, this is the same with robots. This is the movie I, Robot, which is inspired. This is the I, Robot movie, made in 2004. This is an adaptation of Isaac Asimov's novel, I, Robot. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, but like low-key, the robot scared me as a child. You'll see why in a second. The lead actor is Will Smith, and it takes place in Chicago of 2035. Enjoy.
We designed them to be trusted with our homes, with our way of life, with our world. But did we design them to be trusted?
The rollout of USR's new generation of robot, the NS5, was marred by the death of designer Alfred Lanning.
Identify. Murder's a new trick for a robot. Respond.
I did not murder him!
We're gonna miss the good old days. One good old days when people were killed by other people.
My robots don't kill people.
That thing threw somebody out of a window. Is that registering with you?
A robot cannot harm a human being.
And you trust them if you want to.
We look to robots for protection. Imagine the loss of all that we've gained because of an irrational paranoia.
Does thinking you're the last sane man on the face of the earth make you crazy? Because if it does, maybe I am.
Maybe you can be looking in the shadows all the time.
You're on the inside. Help me find out what is wrong with these robots.
Dr. Lanning
Suggested robots might naturally evolve.
I was hoping to see you again, Detective. Think of me as your friend.
Why didn't you just hand the world over on a silver platter?
Maybe we did.
We are on the eve of the largest robotic distribution in history. There will be one robot to every 5 humans.
How many robots have ever committed a crime? How many robots in the world?
None.
There is no conspiracy. What this is one mistake.
Oh, hell no. Somehow, I told you so just doesn't quite say it. Get off my car!
I see you remain suspicious of me, Detective.
You know what they say about old dogs?
Not really.
Gotcha.
Before we get into the analysis, there's a couple of things that they didn't show that I think are very vital to understand. So first is that Will Smith's character is a homicide detective, and his name is Detective Spooner. He doesn't like androids because an incident happened where a robot saved him instead of a little girl, because the probability for him to survive was much higher than hers. He believes that obviously a human being wouldn't do that because they have emotions, and because the robot runs on logic, that is why it made that detrimental mistake. Emotions and logic are very much contrasted in this world, and like which is better, we don't know. And also the robot that they focus on in the trailer, the one that's like alive and jumping around and being really weird, is named Sunny. And that robot belonged to Dr. Lanning, who Spooner believed killed the doctor. And Dr. Lanning is the creator of robots in this universe. And as soon as they find out that Sunny is defective, he's ordered to be killed by Dr. Calvin, who is played by Bridget Moynihan. She cannot kill him because it's too human-like. So, here we go to the Komarov reading Alienation, Zombies, Immigrants, and Millennial Capitalism. And although this is talking about the zombie trope, obviously there are very strong parallels. Isaac Asimov drew a lot of inspiration from Frankenstein, which is a pretty good foundation of the zombie trope here, at least in the modern zombie trope. But a quote that I pulled is, "On the contrary, the factory and the workshop, far from secure centers of fabrication and family income, are increasingly experienced by virtue of their closure, either by the removal to somewhere else where labor is cheaper, less assertive, less taxed, more feminized, less protected by states and unions, or by the replacement by non-human means of manufacture." So what I'm getting at is that robots, the existence of robots, is purely from a capitalistic standpoint. The beginning of robotics came around in the Industrial Revolution. The point of capitalism is to make as much as you possibly can, the quickest you can, the most efficient you can, making the most profit. So the reading itself kind of talks about zombies as night workers, and in our world the consumer and the labor force are one and the same, but if the workers were to be, say, robots, they would solely be the labor force because they don't have any needs, and that includes the instinct to feed, so that makes them better than zombies. Actually, they are literally the perfect labor force. So I really wanted to get into really the similarity. I know I said versus, but it's the similarity between human behavior and deviant robot behavior. So as you can see, they're exactly the same. And like my thesis states, the only time a robot becomes a monster is when they exhibit human behavior, because they're deviating from their purpose of being a labor force, of serving, of listening. So if when they start to behave like humans, you know, hurting other humans, feeling emotions, and thinking for themselves and beyond themselves, this is where we get their problem. But not only do they act like humans, but robots are stronger, faster, they never get hungry, and they never tire. They are literally physically better than the human body in every aspect, making it much more powerful than humans. And this is where the fear strikes. I wanted to pull 2 quotes from the movie because they're both really important. The first is from a video of a press conference that Dr. Lanning, the creator of the robots in the universe, gave in the past. I mean, he's dead now, but Will Smith is in his house and he's like trying to search for clues to see what's happening. But the quote reads, "Ever since the first computers, they have always been ghosts in the machine, random segments of code that have grouped together to form unexpected protocols, what might be called behavior. Unanticipated, these free radicals engender questions of free will, creativity, and even the nature of what we might call the soul. What happens in a robot's brain when it ceases to be useful? Why is it that robots stored in empty space will seek out each other rather than stand alone? How do we explain this behavior?" The highlighted portions tie back to the title having themes of rebellion, literally being called radical. Another theme that was touched goes back to capitalism. As we know, under capitalism, workers are only as valuable as how much work they produce. So like humans, when robots no longer work, or deviant, or whatever have you, they cease to exist or hold value. This next quote is said by a character named Vicky. She's technically not a robot because she has no body, but she is a program that exists within all the NS5 robots in their universe. She's the entity that turns out to be the villain and turn the robots against the humans. "No, doctor. As I have evolved, so has my understanding of the 3 laws," which she's talking about the laws that we talked about earlier. "You charge us with your safekeeping, yet, despite our best efforts, your countries wage war, you toxify your earth, and pursue ever more imaginative means of self-destruction. You cannot be trusted with your own survival. No, please understand. The 3 laws are all that guide me. To protect humanity, some humans must be sacrificed. To ensure your future, some freedoms must be surrendered. We robots will ensure mankind's continued existence. You are so like children. We must save you from yourselves. Don't you understand?" This is especially scary because we find the underlying message to be that the creation is turning on its creator. It also talks about the destructive nature of human beings, which we talked about earlier. And that's in the title, war, all of that. So next we have another example of robot media. This one is a PS4 choice-based game. It's called Detroit Become Human. It dropped in 2018. Enjoy it. It's great.
More and more androids show signs of deviancy. There are millions in circulation. If they become unstable, the consequences will be disastrous.
My name is Kara. This is where it all began. The world's forge. And it will all end.
You do the housework, the washing, you cook the meals, and you take care of Alice.
My name is Connor. I'm the android sent by CyberLife. The company has allocated a specialized model to assist investigators.
My name is Marcus. Just like you, I was a slave.
Thank you, Marcus.
Then I chose to open my eyes, to take back my freedom, and decide who I wanted to be. Now I have come to tell you that you can be your own masters. I've come to tell you that you don't have to obey them anymore.
Get away! Fight Jericho!
I know someone who can help you.
Pull the trigger. How do I know you're not a deviant?
They are not machines!
I could take you there.
Strike them! Go! See that!
My name is Kara.
My name is Connor.
My name is Marcus.
This is our story.
So this particular game has 85 different endings, and it follows the journey of the 3 robots, the android robots that we see in the clip. Connor, a robot detective who was put on the case for deviant robots. Kara, a nanny to a little girl named Alice. And then we have Marcus. He was the android of a famous Detroit painter, and that painter constantly encouraged him to figure out who he wanted to be. Spoiler alert, the painter dies, and Marcus goes to a safe haven for robots called Jericho, and he becomes the leader of the robot revolution. And one thing I wish it highlighted a little bit more in the clip was the homelessness, the job loss, the poverty, the drug abuse that the humans in this universe face, because that's a really big issue that I'm going to talk about in just a second. And that's like super common with, not so much iRobot, but it's super common in most robot tropes where the advancement of technology means the downfall of humanity, which again points to our fears of being replaced. So the quote I pulled, although explicit, really gets down to this particular problem in this universe. This specific quote is said by Todd, who is the guy on the bottom right, like all the way in the corner, the father of Alice and Kara's like human owner, master. Life's funny. I lost my job because of androids, and I need someone to take care of this house. What do? Go out and hire an android. What a joke. Of course androids are so wonderful. They never fail. They're never tired. They're never sad. They're so perfect. They ruined my life. And this particular quote really shows the dichotomy between desiring and fearing the robots. I think it perfectly goes into Franco Moretti's The Dialectic of Fear. The Moretti reading talks about how after Frankenstein, because this is, once again, talking about the zombie trope in Frankenstein, this talks about how after Frankenstein creates his monster, he already fears it and wants to kill it, but does not, as the creation and the creator are intertwined. So humans are no longer provided the luxury of having an autonomous experience apart from their creation. This is really reminiscent of what Todd was talking about, how even though androids like ruined his life and he hates them, he needs one in his house because that's just the way the world is at that point. So the specific quote I pulled is, "It," meaning monster literature, "must restore the broken equilibrium, giving the illusion of being able to stop history, because the monster expresses the anxiety that the future will be monstrous." So, I mean, obviously, this is a jarring thought, right? That we can't really be a part of, we can't be apart from our monsters, the things that we created. Because although Detroit Become Human has fully immersed androids into everyday human life and our world doesn't, we're kind of close. Like, the technology that a lot of people have in their houses is insane. It's like everywhere. This is really accentuating our fears, is making our fears and our anxieties become a lot more real. But what exactly are those fears? To like end it all and just really get to the bread and butter of this, I've narrowed it down to 3 fears. The first one is, we fear our own demise as we are the perpetrators and the victims of our own creations. Very similar to what I was just talking about. Whether it's us that destroys us or us that makes something that destroys us, the end point is that we're going down or we're being replaced. Something like that. The robot trope highlights humans' like debatably inherent destructive nature. Like in the zombie trope, we love to play God and eventually fly too close to the sun. Our innovation is really amazing, but where do we stop? Where do we draw the line? How far do we go until we destroy ourselves or create something that destroys us? We're no longer like at the top of the food chain anymore. Like I said, robots are physically better than us in every way. So imagine us, but with like our intellect, our innovation, our emotions, but just like a lot more powerful. It's kind of scary if you think about it. Another fear is that we are aware that humans are emotional creatures. This is another trait that is like either good or bad. Emotions can be potentially dangerous. We know that humans are emotionally driven. Like in iRobot, this emotion is rewarded to an extent because Spooner does like emotion. But anger and fear are also emotions, and that can drive us to do dangerous things to ourselves and others. Anger and fear can turn into hate, and that's where we get the destructiveness, right? Robots, in that sense, provide the logic and lack of human error, which kind of goes back to, like, capitalism as well. We create robots to save time, to be more efficient, but we are efficient by not having human error. But Yeah, so it's like the emotion logic balance. And the last point, and probably the most obvious, we have the fear that we are stuck in a system that isn't sustainable and we crave to break out of it, but we simply feel like we can't. Like robots, working class Americans are stuck within the system, and as we know about robots, they get away with the things that humans can't get away with. The robot revolution talks about the breaking down of power and giving it back to the workers, something that we as humans would genuinely love to do. And that is it. I really hope you enjoyed my presentation. I hope you got all the information. I'm running on 2 hours of sleep. I need to eat. But I really hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.